It's dead. Can anyone hear me? Or what's going on?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
mine is Ubuntu.
You are recording it?
Um,
I'm recording. I've started recording.
okay.
Great. So let's get started. So who's going to go first and let us all know what was the previous session and what we learned and everything else. Deepak, Rahul, Sri.
So I'll go. So we discussed on who is a product manager and what does a product manager do and why does a product manager exist in an organization. We discussed on what all we do as a product manager, and then we went into details on what do we do as a kind of a day-to-day activities like prioritization, how does an idea start and then where it does it end. So we had a good discussion on prioritization, how prioritization is usually being done, what to consider and what not to consider. And we also had some examples on Slack's notification section to understand how you would actually go about building a feature. So this is majorly what we had. We started user psyche and that's where we left off last time.
Great. Okay. Nice. Rahul, Deepak, do you want to have your own versions for this?
So what Sriram said, so basically we had few examples, we discussed the chat box situation for a banking client. So we did in-depth analysis, how we first find out what exactly a problem would be faced by a banking client, in the chat box system. So we had a discussion whether how we do, first of all, we do the research about where the user must be facing an issue. So we said that we need to collect data, so past conversations with the chat box. Then we just on that particular basis only we set up different priorities about how to tackle that situation. We came up with the priorities and post which then we decided how we should go ahead, building how many solutions we should be going at a time, or we should be implementing every solution at a one go. So
Okay, that sounds great. Deepak, do you want to have
yeah,
a?
so on top of that, I would like to add that one important point that we discussed. A PM should be able to make complex solution look simple. So that's an important point, and we should follow up the execution of the idea into a product by in a very close way by collaborating with the coders and the testers also to make sure that product is deliverable by the on schedule and does not exceed the time that was promised. So that is an important point on top of the things said by Sriram and Rahul.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess we have pretty much context. So let me rephrase it what we did and how much we know right now of a product manager, how a product manager works, why it exists actually, and then we'll come back to this question and go forward with that. So we know what is the role of a product manager comes, right, and when product manager becomes necessary for an organization, we know that. Then we also know that now what is the role of product manager and what is the expectations out of a product manager, right? So so what we discussed was you will be given a problem and how you solve it, when you solve it. So when you solve it is not in your hand, but how you solve it and what better you solve it, how much. So your problem, your job description is more like a problem solver, but you're not the only one who's solving the problem. So that's a pretty complex, or what do you say? It contradicts both the facts, right? You have your job responsibility is to solve the problem, but you're not the alone problem solver. So this becomes a human collaboration kind of thing. So you have to you have to understand different people first, and then you go back to them and have their collaboration on some problems, right? So this is how a product manager role starts. So let's look at who are these important people that revolve around the product manager, right? So we know that a developer is very important for a product manager, a designer is very important for a product manager, and then you have a CEO or executive team telling you, or a VP telling you what to build and anything like that. You'll have your QA or the testing team as well, who will tell you about. So these are the important people who will be supporting a product manager, but you know that they won't be ever reporting to a product manager. So this is also a contradiction in itself, right? You specially need these people, but they won't report to you, so you don't have a direct control over them. But so what I'm trying to say is, product manager is a lot of responsibility without a lot of authority, right? So you will be having X number of responsibilities, but you will be having A or B level of authority. You cannot control things. So you'll have to be very outspoken, and you'll have to be very precise with details, what you are expecting from someone. And then third thing will be, you'll have to be persuasive. You'll have to persuade people to do work, and you'll have to make them understand why it is important. So that's also very important. So this human factor is a lot important. It brings a lot to the table as well, right? If you are able to persuade a people, not only in product management, but even in sales, or even in X number of things, you'll eventually excel in that field, right? So it's quite important in that. And now, with these given facts, we also know what is a product manager, how he rooms into a team, and all this. So what do you think, from outside of this company, who is the most important people in the life of the product manager? Want to give a thought?
The users.
Okay. Shri Rahul.
So I would say I cannot define it to a single person. So it's more like he has to take into account all both users, the management, and the people he is working with. So essentially, I would call the product manager who can empathize with all of them. So he should be someone who can empathize with the user. He can empathize with the designer or a developer, and also their management.
Yeah. Absolutely. Rahul, do you want to give a shot? Do you think who is, apart from this company, who is most important to our
No, so apart from company, I think necessarily thinking as customer should be most important to him.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll tell you why. So I have this quote. I go with this philosophy as well. When I was an intern in some company, I'll tell you that story, that why I'm telling you this. I was an intern in a company, right? And then I started taking ownership about how to do stuff, and I started working with the customer support team. So one day I eventually called a meeting, right? So let's have a meeting. We need to discuss how we do customer support, because there are a lot of emails that's coming in, there are a lot of complaints, and you guys are not able to resolve it. There are so many things, right? Now this I came to that room. That was my first meeting. That I was chill, right? It was very informal, but I was so frustrated with these complaints that I used to get complaints over a WhatsApp message, over a call from users, because I used to directly reach to them. What's the issue? How are you facing? What is that? So this I didn't know this is what you call empathizing with the user, right? Then so eventually in the heat of the moment, I did knew that there was a customer support or manager of customer support, right? I have to go talk to him, and then he'll talk to the team member. I didn't thought it was necessary to talk to him, right? And then I eventually called that dude. I don't know this. You need to do this. Just come into my room, or just come into this meeting room. Let's have a chat. So there were 20 people, 20 support people. They came into the room, and I was so. I'll tell you what. When these 20 people entered that room, I was shut. I didn't have words to speak, because they were all so elderly to me. and they were all so intimidating, right? It was so intimidating to look at these faces, 20 faces at the same time, and I didn't know what to say, because individually it was okay to go and talk to them, but if you see a group of people, you become so intimidated that whatever you wanted to speak, you won't be able to speak. And then I got the courage and I asked the first question: Who do you think is the boss of this company? So that I read somewhere that you should be asking what is in your head, just asking. So they said the Karthik, Sandeep Karthik. So there was some 60-40 in favor of a CEO and CTO, because they thought I report to a CTO, so I'll be pleased that they get to name a CTO, right? Because CTO is heading the company. But what I said to them was, so you are the mascot of the company. You are directly talking to the user, and who is the most important, or who is the boss of the company, is the customers, because when the customer will leave, even the CEO and CTO has to leave, right? When the customer starts complaining about even the CEO, the board will replace the CEO. So CEO is not the boss of the company. So if you look at it as a bird eye view, customer is the most important part of a business, right? You have to take care of your customers, you have to take care of your users in order to not only develop a product but build us a business, right? So that is why product manager becomes so important in this whole scenario, right? Because he is the one who is building product, and he can make or break situations, right? What user will like and what he won't. So this user empathy word that is being misused, or most of the time used, is due to this, because you have to empathize a user and you have to make the life of users so easy. I'll give you an example, right? So let me share you an example. Let's suppose how you build solutions, right? How you build solution. Let's take an example. Just if you have any question, just interrupt me in between, so we'll come to that. Let's suppose you guys are aware of user interviews.
Yes.
Okay. So user interviews is basically you go to that user, identify or talk to them about what problem they are facing in the product, or maybe in whatever way, right? So that is a user interview. You go to the users, talk to them, identify the problem, and then you solve it, right? So there are a couple of differences, right? So there are some things that a lot of product managers do this mistake. They go to the user, talk to them about the problem. Let's suppose you go to the customer and do a user interview, right? Now, what will the what will the customer say? Let's suppose you are a bank and you say, what is the problem you are facing? So he'll say, I have to go to my bank. So let's say this is 2014 or 13, right? 2014 or 15. He says, I go to your bank website, I have to register a PE. That takes 24 hours to approve. And then I go and select, I go and say, I need to transfer this 5,000 rupees. Then it gets approved again, and then it is transferred. If it's an NEFT, it is only for 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. So there are time limits. So this problem can be, I cannot send money at my will, right? Now, so this is a problem statement you got from the customer, right? So you have this problem. Now, what do you say? You say, how do you think we should solve this? If you ask the customer, he'll say, just approve it instantly, right? Approve this customer instantly, or take 1 hour. Don't take 24 hours. Approve it at the same time. Then you should have 24 hours of paying the bills, or of 24 hours of the window where we can do transactions. Now, so this becomes a user's problem and user solution. So this is how a user is defining his problem, and this is how a user is defining his solution. So this is so why I'm saying this. This is the worst mistake a product managers do, because you don't take suggestions or you don't take solutions from the users. Right? So why it's important to understand this: if you take solutions from users, they so again coming to that point, because you have a bubble or you have a certain understanding, you'll be finding your solution only in that surrounding, right? Only in that surrounding. And so he'll be saying you that just take a 1 hour or approve instantaneously, right? Or just do it on the spot, like that. Now, what's the best solution to it? Take a moment. Sriram, I know you did that. Just don't. You have to keep it. Deepak and Rahul, just so this is how you have a problem, and you need to make sure that you get a solution, and you have to build it. What do you think at this point would be a solution for you? So you got a problem from the user, and you have to develop a solution for them. What do you think? Let's say so an average or a good product manager, what would they do is, Rahul, you want to say something?
So I was saying the main problem which he was discussing was that whenever he adds a new pay, it takes him 24 hours to get updated on the portal, right?
Yeah.
So as he himself suggested that the pay needs to be updated as fast as possible, but I think that will require some time. Maybe there is some background validation or verification done before updating the pay.
Yeah.
So I think the best solution will be to get that process as quick as possible of validation and verification, so that the pay is updated as fast as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Deepak, what do you think?
Yeah, so we won't be able to completely reduce it to 1 hour, but what I would feel is first make it into half of what it is already taking, is what I would feel. Just like Rahul said, work on verifying the page is a little more faster. So make some changes to the backend where the verification process takes more time, and try to optimize it so that we can at least reduce the time by half, is what I would do.
Okay. So I'll tell you a great story after this. Let's suppose so how a product manager decides a problem is worth solving or not is so this is a problem. So this is a theory called 99 and 1. So 99% and 1%. So once you so this first thing that the product manager has to understand, or any company who is solving a problem, or anyone who is solving a problem, is, are you solving a problem for 99% of your user, or are you solving a problem for your 1% of user, right? So what do I mean by that is, if you're solving it for 1% of user, it's okay not to solve it. And why I'm telling this is, let's take an example of Paytm, right? Paytm has some frauds. Let's say it gets fraud, right? It gets so this is a very interesting tale. So if you guys just will listen to this, I guess you'll also enjoy this. So what happened with Paytm was accounting a lot of frauds in recent 2018 and 2019, right? So they thought we should solve this, but they choose not to solve it, because what it does is, the fraud was amounting to 1,000 or 12,000 or 1,200 crores, right? Only. And if you solve it for that much amount, you might lose a lot more in the process of you might hamper the maybe the 99% of user how they interact with the application. So how I'm saying this is, you might start asking them for one or two more Aadhaar cards or PAN cards during onboarding, and that might result a 10% of drop of your user that currently you have on your application, right? So this is how you define you don't want to solve it. Then TRAI started a research paper which said we'll start doing a blockchain for SMSs where every bank has to register to a central blockchain and they'll start sending messages so that we can reduce this whole fraud situation in the fintech. This was well thought, but on the grounds it will take a lot of money to implement it, and as a result you will be hampering 99% of user behavior. So this is how you understand or prioritize which problem to solve. Now coming back to the NEFT problem, right? You know that this transfer of funds, 99% of the people are facing the same problem. They are facing every user is facing the same problem of 24 hours of verification, 24 hours of 5,000 rupees amount verification, and then sending it back, and then even having a time limit on that, right? So this is so when this problem got so much bigger and a lot of emphasis was on this problem, then what happened is Nandan Nilekani, who was a founder of Infosys as well, and he started Aadhaar as well. He thought that we should solve this problem, right? And he ideated a concept of UPI, right? So what UPI is directly is just you have an email address, you have a UPI address as similar to a UPI ID. It's already verified, right? It's already verified. You don't have to verify, and you just give your UPI ID to somebody else, and they'll pay it back, and that's instantaneously. So this is how you solve a problem. You first identify if it's worth solving, if it's worth investing your time. Is it impacting my 99% of users? If yes, I need to solve this. If it's impacting a 1% of user and the solution to that 1% users problem solving will hamper how 99% of users interact with my application, then it's okay to stop, or it's okay to not solve it. So that was the crux of story. So that was the birth of UPI, how UPI happened. So any questions to that? I guess that would be quite clear stories. Anyone?
No questions.
No.
No questions? Great. So do you understand how we solve problems, like how a product manager, or how any company, or how you even solve your problem, right? So
Is
you
there a
identify.
certain percentage criteria which is seen all the time when developing a solution? What, for example, 60-40, will we go for it or don't, or will not?
So see, 60-40. So there are a couple of things. Whenever you are solving a problem, whenever you have a problem, you'll have impact. So how much impact does it bring to your company in terms of revenue or in terms of users, right? Or users like
Churn
you?
rate.
Yeah. So if it impacts a lot, so if it impacts 20% of your company revenue, you better solve it. Even if it's a 40% of your users problem, or even if it's 1% of users problem, right? So it's better to solve it. So you have to decide. So this is not a binary that you solve a 99 or 1. You'll have to identify that is it worth solving by looking at various metrics, right? You'll be your judge on itself, right? Is it worth solving it or not?
Yeah.
You'll be your own judge, right? Okay, so let's do this UPI story. Let's make this go forward itself. Now what we'll do is, anyone, do you think are you guys aware of a user journey or user map? Anyone has heard about it?
I have heard about it.
Yeah.
So basically, it is all the different touch points a user have from the starting of the journey till the means a sale is closed, or he, for example, he buys a product.
Hmm.
All the different
Yeah.
touch points he goes during the entire process from the
Hmm.
start till the he has bought the product is
Yeah.
email.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely correct. So I'll just expand what Rahul was explaining here. User journey is basically how you design a user comes to your platform. So it will start at the same point. If it's a mobile product, when he installs your product, and how he starts with the login to the end product of buying something or performing an action which you think that will complete the journey. So in case of Paytm, it would be doing a transaction because its end result is transferring money. In terms of Spotify, it would be, or Amazon Music, it would be to buy the subscription, right? So the journey from starting that install to that first transaction would be a user journey, and how you map it is called user journey, right? So let's take an example. So I have this beautiful. If you guys can see my screen. Okay, awesome. See my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. I'll tell you why it's important. Okay. So see, couple of things here. User journey starts with how you onboard a customer and how you make him perform the last action you want, right? So it will start, let's say we are talking about Spotify. So Spotify's main action would be either, so it would be to buy a premium, right? If not, let's change the, what do you say, our actionable results. So what we want from the users. So let's say uh, we we just we just want him to share some songs to the customers. So why I'm saying this is, let's say Spotify just launched and it's been a year only, right? So first thing you'll do at that time is, the more people will have Spotify, the number of chances of getting revenue will start multiplying, or start multiplying exponentially. Because if you get 10 rupees from 10 people, that becomes 100, right? But if you get 10 rupees from 100 people out of 1,000 people, that becomes a 10,000 rupees, right? Or 1,000 rupees. So the broader users you have, the scope of revenue grows, right? So let's say Spotify just started, it's been a year, and their end goal now is, so that they can share users, if the users share the music to their friends or maybe co-workers or family, then we start when we say that the user journey started, right? So let's look at how that user flow would look like. Yeah. Okay. So user flow A. So flow A starts Spotify. So this is after post installation of the app. So the user starts. So this is start end. So these are important to identify. So these are the labels we use in a flowchart. It will be useful if you guys can just speak. I assume it's all good.
What did you mean when you said that this was the fourth installation of Spotify? Did that mean something?
So I'm saying this is post installation of the
Okay,
application.
post you are saying so.
Yeah. So post application install is the prerequisite step for a user to come to this journey, right?
So Rohan, I had a doubt here.
Yeah.
So you said that the Spotify makes a note of the number of users that subscribes. So can the number of minutes that a user is on the app be also one of the metrics for that? Because you can show the ads and generate a revenue for that, right? So
So
the
these are the metrics that you might want to start having, right? So these are the metrics you think that's important for your application, for your product, right? So these metrics would be how much monthly active users you have, how much daily active users you have, and then how many people are using. So on average, how many people are listening to how many songs. So these are the metrics that you define yourself for. So these are the KPIs of a product, key performance indicators. So uh, once you have a successful product, then these data points become so important for you to take decisions, right? In the starting phase, data is, you don't have a lot of data to make sense of. But once it grows out of 100,000 users or to a million or to $10 million, then data is your only source of making decisions. So you can start storing data from this point. So as I said, Spotify is just launched. It's been a year. It only has 100 users, and this is what we are looking at right now. Don't just erase what Spotify is in your head right now. We are looking at Spotify at the initial point of its launch, right? Our focus right now is to grow users on Spotify, right? Fair enough.
Yes. Yes.
yes,
Okay. So we have Spotify. The user starts Spotify, clicks the application. So first thing what you check is if the user is logged in or not, right?
Correct.
Then you say if the user is not logged in, give him an option of logging or signing up, right? If he doesn't, so again, if you see login or sign up, even you identify with the email. If this email is existing one, if it's existing one, you just log him in. If it's not, if it's no, then you again throw him to the same page where he'll sign up and then log in. So sign up becomes login once you become the user, right? So once you have completed some sign up successfully, you will be logging in, not signing in.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Then if he is login or he's already logged in, so he'll come to the home. So this is the home, or this is dashboard, what we call in a product, right? So dashboard is basically where user lands after logging in. So it can be a home or dashboard. For making it easy, let's say it's dashboard. Now, from home, the user can perform various of tasks, right? He can choose music, he can search on music, he can do a number of stuff. Let's say we have from your contact share with you, make selection now playing. Now we want to increase a feature. So our core vision right now is of this problem statement is we want to grow user base of Spotify, right? So we'll have to introduce something that will help us in this cause. So what we'll do is we'll say on the home button we'll give a refer, or maybe refer your friends and get a 3-month subscription fee kind of thing, right? Once he clicks that, we'll say from your contacts, these are the people who are playing these songs, right? Make selections. So from your contact, shared with you. So these shared with you is people who have already shared the playlist with you, right? Their playlist to you. Make selection. If no, then you come back to the same thing. If yes, now play. So you understand. So this is the creating ecosystem kind of thing where you can go to your friends' playlist and start playing from there, right? And then you share, select contact to share with, select and share. So this is where you come. So once you are now playing, so it can be your friend's playlist song, or it can be your own song, right? You can just go in and play some song, random song, or you can go to your friend's playlist and select his song. Once you start playing, you'll have an option to share that song. So this was where I was coming. You'll go to the share option, just select which contact you want to share, select and share, shared with username. Now shared with username is once he has selected which contact to share, we'll just show a pop-up or show a message that it's been successfully shared. Now, this is the endpoint of user A. So this is the exact thing what we needed a user to do, right? So we needed him to log in and share something to his user or to his friends, and he has accomplished that. So for us, this is the definition of done. So this is the definition of completing a whole onboarding experience, right? Now we'll go to so once he has shared something, dormant user is the one whom the user A shared the song to, right? Now what will happen is user B will get a notification, right, that user A shared this song or shared this playlist with you. We want to just have a look. So this I'll tell you. This is very important in copy is very important. I'll tell you what I was saying, what I mean by that. Okay. Open Spotify. He opens Spotify. He sees if he's looking important phrase, critical phrase. Why I'm saying this is the point where we want him to convert as a user, right? So this is the point where we need him to sign up so that we increase our user base by one, right? So the more frictionless or more intuitive this flow would be, the more higher chances of us converting that user would be, right? So once he's logged in, he signs up, logged in, now playing, say that song. Now playing means the song the user is selected for him. He starts saying, if he saves the song, yes, he has to savings. If no, nothing happens. Right? So this is how we what do you say? This is how we map a user's journey or using user flow, right? So we need to make sure that how we want a user to travel or to, what do you say, to experience the whole journey till the end point or till the definition of what we assume that this is the definition of completing a user flow, right? So this is how we do user flows. Great. So is there any questions with that? No? Anyone? Rahul, Deepak, Sri?
I would just like to add that at every point of this customer journey, the customer should be satisfied. Otherwise, the journey breaks and the process is incomplete. So I think as a product manager, our priority becomes that as well. That every step of the journey is means customer is satisfied at that.
Yeah. So for user journey, there is a pro tip or maybe a mantra that we should have for every product manager. That is the less number of actions or steps a user does to make a journey successful. So the less number of action or a step a user has to do to make a journey success or done or finishing a journey, the higher the chance you have of conversion. So I'll give you a live example. So anyone understand what I said here?
Yes.
Yes.
Try to minimize the number of hurdles or the interaction that the user has to
Yeah.
do to complete the journey.
Absolutely.
In fact, hurdles, I would say.
You don't
If there are
want
more
him to do
steps-
100 numbers. Yeah. Deepak, go on.
Yeah, if there are more steps, then obviously everyone would quit midway.
Yeah.
So that's not a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Give me any examples do you want to give? Anyone? Which is the application that gives you minimum number of steps into your onboarding?
Okay, I don't know if this is a right example, but with Instagram, you can just link your Facebook. So you don't have to do anything. Just enter your Facebook password, and it just logins automatically without any details of your name or anything else. So I know it's an interconnected app, but anyway, that reduces the step by a very far convenience.
Absolutely. So that is a one tap or one flow,
Yeah,
right?
click to login. Yeah, that's very easy.
Yeah, that's very easy. Anyone else? You want to have a shot?
Maybe a splitwise if you have used one. So that's a app which allows you to split expenses between your friends. So all that you need to do is to just connect with your either Google account or you just put in your email and then add your first transaction. So that's almost a two-step process. One is signing up and then just adding a transaction to show you how it is done. Apps like this
Yeah.
are pretty good in increasing the usage over there. So you don't have any hurdles over there. You just enter your name and then come and start working.
Yeah, agreed. So I'll give you a generic example of, and even what's most popular. If you try using Google, right, you won't even have to enter your email address. You can just use it, right? So there's no step involved to use that product. You don't even have to register anything. You just go search something, or you just go to any application of what Google has. You go to their YouTube, you go to Maps, you go to Google search. What else? What else do we have? Anything, right? Even Google Meet, you don't have to just register. You can just join it without any account. So this is how you map a user flow, where you don't want to complicate, or you don't want to maximize the number of steps user has to do, so that just to make sure that he reaches to your product, right? So this is very important, right? How you design this user flow. Now the second example I want to just go on is this one. So this is, he wants to create a movement with Bunsen here with Jane. Right. So these are the features. So once you remember when we talked about releases, and once we talked about epics and then converting them into releases. Anyone remembers that?
Yes.
Okay. So once you map out what is the epic, or what will the release look like, let's say you want to release a feature where you can associate a memory with any song with Spotify. That is your overall release, right? Then you have to map out how that feature will work inside the same application or inside the existing user flow. So that's how you do it. You make a remembers a song from the past. So this is what a user's side of. So this is what a user is thinking before doing this action. User is thinking that he remembers a song from the past and he goes straight to Spotify. So anyone wants to explain what's missing here at this step? What we didn't take account of?
Whether he's already signed into Spotify.
Yeah. Sign up login. Excellent. So yeah, we need to be very precise. So what he has done here is, once you're making an epic, or once you're making a release, or mapping out how the release will look like with our existing application, you can take the liberty of excluding what we currently have. Right? So we currently have a login, so you can take the liberty of skipping it, and let's make sure, so you know what login and sign up will do in this user map. But we missed that, so it's very important to take note of, for us at least. He goes to home, search result, right? Let's say he remembers a Queen song, right? Bohemian Rhapsody. He search for Bohemian Rhapsody. Either he gets the song, or he doesn't get the song, right?
Correct.
here here also he can do one thing. He can add the movement either from the search results or the song details screen. Let's say we give a tick mark option at the search as well for each song. He just clicks on that and he's added, this song is added to his movements library, right? So do you see what happened here? We'll have a pen here. So what actually happened in this area is, what happened here is you made the user interaction very short. So your definition of done is, I guess, done here, right? If he is able to search your song even in the search box, he can just mark it as the movement and your user pro is done even here. And there is a possibility that he wants to listen to that song, and if he likes it again, and he wants to do it again, right? So what I'm saying is, he goes searches the song, he can do it there itself. If not, he searches the song and song starts playing. Song detail, option overlay. Option overlay means overlaying the options. Overlaying means, yeah, okay. Now here he'll be getting a exclusive feature where we'll be asking that, do you want to create a movement? Because at this point we know that, what do we know here?
He might be interested in creating a moment. Or
first thing is he searched for some news, search for some songs, right? And he clicked on creating a memory. So we know that he's looking for creating a memory. So we give him an option, maybe full screen or maybe just a banner that says, do you like this song and do you want to create a movement? Because we know that this is 90% of the 90% chances that he's looking to do this action. If he does yes, we'll just say, what is this movement? We'll ask him, is it your date, or do you remember, are you sad, or are you anything, right? If it's not, then it's a point where you are asking him that if it is or if it's not. If it's saying it's not, then it's not, right? You don't want to just ask him over and over again. If it is, he'll go to the song again, and he knows that once he goes to that song again, you'll be asking him again, right? Because that is how he thinks, right? Let's suppose he comes to Bohemian Rhapsody and you ask him, do you want to create a memory? He says no, right? And he said, okay, I was mistaken, I want to create a memory. He goes to the song again and he exclusively search for the feature where he can create a memory. Right. Moment detail, click with that name. So these are how you save in the moments. You can customize this moment with this performance galleries. So yeah, these are the things. So first thing what we looked at is how we are making a user flow from the starting. So that start was downloading an application, and from the login or sign up to doing an exclusive action, which is the most important action we need right now as per our. So for this situation, this was the most important action or goal of the product, because at this point your company's goal is to grow this product, right? At this juncture, the company's goal is to grow the product, and to do that you have created an option to share this, and this is the most important action or goal of the product, right? So here we looked at how a user will behave from point A to point B, from starting point A to end of point B. And now at this second example, we looked at how we map a feature in an existing product. So these are two things, right? First thing was you make a product, and second thing was you introduce a feature in a product, right? So this is user journey or user maps, how we do it. Any questions in that? Start asking questions, guys. It becomes quite tough.
So I saw a similar case study related to Swiggy, where they were explaining how they have made their UI better, that they have most of the food ordering apps, they said that they make their address as default so that not every time you are going to order, you need to select the same address, right? And by your preferences and your past orders, they also make a list of your favorite restaurants or your favorite food or the food that you order most of the times. So, for example, a person regularly orders from Swiggy, it becomes very handy for him that he doesn't have to go and search for same food every time in other restaurants. He has some preference. So I think that case study was also saying the same thing, how they are making their user experience much easy. And I think in 2 to 3 clicks, they also save their cards, and payment options.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so in 2 to 3 clicks, your food is ordered. So the
Yeah.
shortest possible user flow, I think, will be the best for.
Yeah. I'll explain you one more thing that I was also thinking about this food deliveries. So if you look at food deliveries app as a whole, right? Even if you go to Zomato and Swiggy, what is the time you take to choose a food to order? How much time do you think you take? I take more than
Mostly,
10 minutes.
Yeah,
10 minutes.
even I do that. I mean, you have to decide between options and then order. The actual ordering process is just 2 minutes, but
Yeah.
the time you take
if
on deciding
yeah,
the food is 5.
if we have a predefined, I have to eat this, and I know where it is the best which I can get nearby.
Yeah.
So it will not take much of a time. But if
Yeah, because if you have a mind, right, you know
Hmm.
what to order and what to not, then you know that will come handy, right?
Hmm.
But with most of the people, what the problem with food delivery app is the process of discovery, right? The process of discovery is basically discovering the whole application and what do you want out of the app, what do you want out of the application, because there will be a time where you start thinking, uh, you three four options, let's say, and you choose that I'll order biryani, and you go to Kareem's and you say biryani there, it is 340. If I look at this shop for again and it says 280, and then you see one more place where it is just 160, that process of discovery, right? And that is a place where food deliveries, Swiggy did a very better job. They started with this thing that this is where data also comes very handy, right? There you know which type of food you like, and then they rank restaurants and food in order with that. And once, so coming to 99 and 1% of this problem. So they identify this is a problem for 99% as well, right? If you look at average time the user is spending before ordering a food delivery apps will be minutes. And then if you then you go and Swiggy identified that this is a 99% problem and we have to do something. And then they introduced what do you call it? I really don't know. Swiggy Shorts or Swiggy One Meal that offers you 99
Pop,
rupees
pop,
per meal
Swiggy pop.
for one day. Swiggy Pop, yeah,
Pop,
Swiggy
yeah,
Pop,
Swiggy Pop.
yeah. So they identified this problem and they started, based on the tons of data they have, they started combining data or combining food orders in a single row with free delivery, because people usually tend to not order if they don't then get food delivery free. So these are the things that Swiggy handled very well and introduced Swiggy Pop, right? And it becomes very famous as well. So these are the problems and these are the things that will fascinate you a lot, right? Because you as a user, you'll think that I just give me an option of biryani at the top and I'll be happy. But as a product manager, you'll have to understand that if this is a problem for 99%, you stop. I want to give them a better. Yeah, great to bring that. Rahul. That was a great refresh.
But
So
don't you think if we allow them, make it that the churn rate will increase in that case? Because mostly people will say after 20-30 minutes, "अरे यार घर में ही बना लेते हैं." The quicker you order, I
yeah.
think that should be. What I feel is that at times I have also done that. "अरे यार छोड़ो, ये आधा घंटा time is let's cook at home."
Absolutely. So yeah, food delivery app product managers have this problem across maybe Zomato, even Zomato, Swiggy, let's say, and then you have Mojo and everything else. I've talked to these people, and the main problem they have is people usually discover food for 20 minutes and they switch it off. Maybe they just said that I'll make Maggi or I'll make something else and it's okay, right? So their problem or their solution to this is they want to identify what is the need of the customer and they display everything that works, right? So if you look at these apps, how they have improved their UX from what Zomato used to be and now Zomato is, right? It starts displaying you. So if you look at Zomato, anyone can share screen and see we have Zomato. I'll do that with my phone. Let me see if I have the option. Okay, no, doesn't screen. Okay. Let me see. Let's do a live. Do I screen a screen of my phone? This. You saw my phone screen?
No.
Yeah.
Loading. Now we can.
Great. Now let's look at Zomato. Where is Zomato? So let's look at Zomato. So first thing what you see here is let's see what this. So this is copy, right? The green yellow bell. Copy needs to be very important if you want to engage with the customer. What do you see the top Zomato? Let's try to identify or let's try to see what the UX of Zomato is for us. What do you think you seeing here, and what they are trying to convey to the user?
Provide us with the places which we ordered earlier and then make it easy for us to order again.
So first thing is they want to give you an option of discounts, right? Because they have identified the more discount people see, the higher chance of them ordering from there is, right? So they give you. So first, biggest banner you see is you go to the discounts, and here you get all the restaurants where they are offering you discount. Now you see which pizzas they have, right? So 40%. So you'll see is coming at top. Right. First thing is you Insta pizza, right? And if you see correctly, it has a promoted tag here, and you won't be able to see it, right? And then maximum safety, that is bringing an attention to the user, or it's a validation to the user that it is safe, right? And then they have 3996 delivery reviews. So the more reviews you have, the chances of what do you say?
Rating going down.
Yeah.
So one more shrewd thing Zomato does is Zomato gives you Zomato ratings is based on the weighted system. So they will review the newest reviews much more higher than the past reviews. So it's not equal how Amazon or Flipkart does. So let's go back to the main screen. So first thing they do want you to do is they have shortened your path of food discovery. They just want you to just select this 50% of discounted restaurants, right? So they have narrowed down the restaurant you can visit. You understand? So their solution to this is also to make the discovery process shorter. So first thing they did is they just gave you an option just to see the restaurants which have discounts, right? Now if you don't want that, then the second thing is they want you to go to your history and see if you want to, because there is a higher possibility of you ordering from that food or ordering the same food from the same restaurant again than going to a new restaurant and ordering a new stuff from them, right? So they identified this and they gave you this option. Now these are lockdown cravings. So these are the things that they identify based on data. What are people liking the most? And this is the third thing they put it here. So they ordered in that same fashion that they biryani is been selling a lot, and then pizza, fries, and something like that. Lasagna, shake, ice cream, burger. So this is where data becomes handy once your application is scaled enough and you have data enough so that you don't make assumption based on 100 or 1,000 people's sample set, but a lot bigger, a million or a lakh of users sample set. Right? Then you can do a show more kind of thing. And so quick links. If you haven't got to a single restaurant or a food, so this is a home page and you have scrolled 2 pages, right? So if you see this, you haven't been to a restaurant yet. You're just seeing the options. So these are the things which they are doing to restrict your search capability or discovery process, right, to a single thing. So they are making up your mind to just pick things in your mind that what do you want, right? So till now you haven't seen a restaurant now, right? Now the next thing you see here is quick links. So these quick links is what they have identified that people meals for one or healthy or safety. So these are the things that you can just click on it and you set a subset of restaurants, right, that are only safe, that are only good, or that are offering only healthy. And you haven't got a single restaurant till this point at the homepage. It's very interesting. And now you start seeing the restaurants, right? So now you start seeing Insta pizza and stuff like that, and now you see full test as well. And if you see this, these 450 people order from and maximum safety that's been rolling out, what is it showing you? It's showing you, or it's giving you a validity, right? That this restaurant is very safe to order and 450 people order since lockdown. So these are the things that Zomato is doing to restrict you from doing a whole process discovery or a lunch discovery or maybe food discovery on your own by giving you options of limiting yourself or making your mind before you order things. Right? So yeah, so that was, I don't know the word for that, but that's a very simple or very great discovery, or what do you call it? What do you call these kind of things? Case study? Yeah. So this can be a case study what we do. So if you see at every place they have this 200 people order during lockdown or burger singer and stuff like that. So these are the things that giving you more validation that you can order, right? Now, yeah, it will be endless scroll. So if you just scroll down, it will be endless scroll.
So essentially, I mean, what I could get out of it is that Zomato just try to avoid you doing this endless scroll, or else going and finding the category of restaurant which you want to eat by yourself. Rather, they display maybe 5 to 10 categories out of your own data, or else maybe that might be a random category. I believe that might be out of your own data.
Yeah,
To make
yeah,
it easy
yeah,
for you to select, that's the way they have reduced the user journey here.
yeah,
Or else you would have
absolutely.
been shooting in the dark.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So, so these are the problems, and these are kind of this will also amuse you, right? You never thought of a user or application like that. You never thought. So we are essentially a consumer, right? What we are given, we are just there consuming it. But if you go to the minds of others, right? If you start thinking how a hiring manager thinks, then it will be very easy to crack a job. And when you start thinking how a product is made, it will be very easy to think like a product manager will make products. So if you just reverse the role, life becomes very easy. It's true for everything, right? So yeah, Zomato was a very great case study. So any questions till now, Deepak? Go ahead. Sri.
So I was pretty clear about the initial user journey. So let's say I kind of have completed the initial user journey and I have a user with me right now. Then how do you define what he has to do after this? I mean, do we also consider that as user journeys or navigating within the platform or whatever next action he has to take? What do you consider that action to be as?
So yeah, that's a great question. So I'll just get this question a bigger, what do you say, a bigger weight, right? So how do you define us? So this is essentially a second interaction or second transaction the user does with the application. So your user journey should always account or take account of the second, third, and the iterative user journey the user will do after completing the first. So I'll give you an example. You'll have to take account that so your second transaction or your second user doing the same transaction, second iteration of user would be a subset of the overall set that you created for the first user journey, initial user journey, right? So in case of Spotify, it would be a user coming into the application again, doing a search. So he saves that 3-4 steps in the beginning, right? He saves that what do you say, logging in, signing up, and going to the home and stuff like that. So it saves the stuff. So this is a subset of the same set we talked about, and he'll be able to save this bottom part as well. Then we'll come to that. He starts from doing a search. He searches for a song, or he just discovers his in his home screen. He clicks on that, listens to it, shares it to somebody else, right? And then your journey is complete. So this is an iterative loop that will happen over and over again for a repetitive customer. So eventually your first user journey should be covering the whole iterative loop as well. If it's not, then you have to reconsider what you did for your user journey. Right? Okay.
So, Rohan, is there any time limit before we change the, model of how the user signs up? For example, is there any time like 1 month, or let's wait for 1 month and see the result, or wait for 2 months? So, is there any time limit that is set by the product manager before changing the model if there is no sign up flow for the app?
So, Deepak, everyone, I'll tell you one thing. Once you start getting into the shoes of a product manager, you'll start feeling that there is no black and white. You'll start feeling that everything is great, and you'll have to define everything. So what I'm saying basically is, Deepak, coming to your question, how do you define that this user journey is correct or not, right? Or it's basically giving you a lot of churn, maybe, right? How do you define that? If you you'll have to make sure what you are shipping is the best options you have. So coming back to what I was telling you in the first session, maybe you'll have to identify which is the best solution you have, and then you ship that, right? So if you have, let's say, 4 type of user journeys, you'll have to identify which is the best user journey, which is taking the shortest time, or which is having the least interaction with users, and you ship it. And if it's not working, then you rework your whole user journey again, right? So this is a user feedback you'll get eventually after, what do you say? It can be a month, it can be a year, it can be 10 years, right? So you'll have to make sure once you release a feature, you have to make sure what is the set expectation from that feature. So once you release a user map, let's say your product, and you say that you are getting a 70% churn, 70% people are going to the login page and not coming back. So you'll have to define what is the acceptance or what is the KPI for that feature. If you say that I'm okay with 30% churn, and if it's taking more, then you'll have to go back to your drawing board and provide it. So you'll have to, before you ship a feature, you have to identify what is the KPI for that. What is a success or what is not a success. You'll have to define it first before it's shipped. Right? Does it answer your question?
Yes.
Just to add to that question, Rohan, I don't know if it might make sense to this context, but let's say you roll out a user journey and you see that you get 100,000 people and you see maximum of them are not converting. Now this could be a problem of the people who you have brought in also, right? So how do you distinguish between that your journey is wrong against the people you brought into the app is wrong? I don't know,
So
this might
basically
not-
marketing, is it?
Yeah, and I'm saying it might not be a product question outrightly, but a lot of our decisions also depend upon the audience which you're bringing in or the people who are using the app. Our decision cannot go wrong on the basis of your wrong audience which you're having. So that's what my question is. How do we take that call normally?
So yeah, this is basically even before launching your product, once you have mapped out what the vision of your product or what's the vision of your feature is, you'll know who are your target customers or who are the target users, right? If you are able to identify that, and you'll be able to segregate out who the non-target users as well are, right? And once you identify both these things, then you should be able to segregate them at any point of choice, right? Any point of decision you are making, you should be able to segregate both of them and take a decision after that. So, Sri, to your question, let's suppose 100,000 users comes in and 90,000 of users are non-target group, right? A non-targeted user. You should be at that point of time, you should be able to identify that these are non-targeted users. How you do that? Either you start tracking the kind of users that are coming to the platform, or do anything else, but you'll have to do that. So there are various kind of tools, right? You start doing it through Google Analytics, you start doing it through Amplitude, you start doing it through anything else, but you'll need to do that before you take a decision. So that is a prerequisite before you take a decision, right? How you weed out the non-target groups.
So again, let's say if you're adding any probably a input or more inputs which I want to get from my customer at the time of onboarding, which could have given me this insight that he is not relevant to. So let's say if I want to target a business which has at least 10 employees, let's say I'm doing a HR software, if I added this as a metric or input over there, even if it's one step extra, that would make sense, right?
Try to not include that one step inside the user journey, but that should be an external thing. But if you think that it is important enough, and you know that if it's important enough to add that in user journey and you're ready to hamper 99% of people doing that, then it's okay. But try to make it external.
What
Yeah.
I saw somewhere that, for example, if you feel certain set of questions are important for a person to answer, at the beginning, and but you also know that if we make the process very lengthy or ask a many number of questions on a single page, a person may right there, go off the app or just close down the app. So they basically suggested that you should ask question on a different page. For example, a single question on a single page, a next question on another page. That also helps user to feel that okay, they're asking very few less number of questions, so they keep on continuing on that app. I saw that in a case study, where by the time of joining, the user was asking earlier 3 to 4 questions on a single page, and post an upgrade they started asking similar questions but on a different page, so the per set of page single question were coming. So they found that work and number of people going ahead and filling up the form were much higher. I
Yeah.
think this was the case study of Tinder.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are design problems, right? I'll so I'll quickly jump into what I was going to discuss today because I didn't touch that. We'll just have a quick session on that as well. So I'll have a designer, right? He'll explain you what goes into design and how designers think, right? And anything. So these are the things that designer think. So if you, it's very human that if you give a person a form, like I do a Google form that I wrote as well, that if you think that this form is too long, don't fill it, because people's first thing is if you ask a lot of questions at a single place, they'll refuse to do it because they think that will start consume their time more. So it's a basic human tendency, and it's absolutely fine. How you deal with it is distribute the questions or distribute the onboarding or ask relevant questions at relevant time, right? So let's take an example. Flipkart and Amazon, and maybe as well, what do you say? Flipkart and Amazon lets you choose or lets you explore products even without sign up and sign in, right? And once you add that, you go to the checkout. Then at that time you start filling your form or you start
Yes.
signing up and login, right? So this is a prime example of asking relevant question at relevant time because you want them to explore or you want them to discover the product and then do the relevant thing, right? So yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Should I go? Let me think. Yeah, let me quickly do a thing. Screen. You guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Yeah. See it now?
No, no.
No. Yeah. Now it's loading.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So what I wanted to discuss today was now we are at a stage where you guys know who is a product manager, what he does, how to think about a product, how to design a user flow. So what I want now is we are a company. Let's suppose I am the CEO and I want to build a UPI application. Let's say a GeoPay or maybe something else much better. What do you say? Apple Pay. Apple Pay already exists. What can be a name?
Twitter page.
Twitter Pay. Let's say Twitter Pay. And Twitter Pay's first thing is they want to build a UPI application, which lets them. So vision of this application would be which lets users send, receive, recharge payables, do anything related to money inside the application, right? So you get the idea of what I'm saying, right? You make a copy of the Google Pay or maybe anything else. We have to build an application which can UPI application where you can send money to anyone else through UPI, recharge, pay bills, shop, everything else inside the application. Now coming to the problem statement, one thing you'll also have to figure out with building that application is how you want to pivot, or how you want to attract customers who are already on some other UPI application, right? So this is one more problem statement that you might want to solve with this building of application. Now, so this is a CEO's job to delegate this thing now to the product manager. I have told you the vision, also the problem statement that might come with that. Now, what your job individually is to answer these questions, right? So first thing is you'll need to ideate the objective and how many versions you want to have to release this. Timeline is okay. What you have to do first is you have to ideate what will be the objective, or what will be the epics, what we discussed yesterday. A lot of features become epics and releases. So how many releases you'll have in the version 1? What will the objective of those releases would be? What will be the objective of all these releases would be? And how many versions you want to break it down to, so you have a minimum product which works, and then you build on top of it, and on top of it, or on top of it, and on top of it. So it's on to you how many versions you want to have. So once you have identified all the releases you'll have, let's suppose for Spotify you'll have a user registration flow, user registration release, which will have cover your login, sign up, Google sign up, Google login, everything like that. That will be one release. Second thing will be your dashboard or the home section, which where you'll use have last played songs. Then you'll have top 50 songs, channels, third podcast, and stuff like that. You'll have a search, and then you have 4 taskbar at the bottom that says settings, home, share, and stuff like that. That will be your second release. Third release will be maybe playing a song, play, pause, loop, in loop, play next, play forward, pause, or anything like that. That will be a third release. Once you have the objective of these releases, you will be able to identify. So how we define objective of any releases? Once you ship that release, what will the user be able to do after that, right? So for, let's say, the registration release, as an user, after this release, the objective of this release is, as a user, he'll be able to log in, sign up, log in via Google, log in via Facebook, log in via Twitter, and sign up via everything else, and go to his dashboard. So that is the objective of that release, right? And then objective of your dashboard release would be, as a user, after logging in, he'll be able to land to his dashboard. After he lands to his dashboard, he'll be able to search for any songs, search for playlist and anything else. Then he'll be able to play last 50 popular songs, play channels, play podcasts, and stuff like that. And then these are how you define objective of releases, right? Any questions till that? No? Okay. So once you have identified all the releases you need to have to make this product, you need to identify or prioritize what will be the version 1 look like. So it will only have a login sign up. Maybe you don't want to have Google sign up, or you don't want to have Facebook sign up in the first version. You can work on it in the later release. You'll just have email, password. Then he goes to the dashboard. He just has the search for song, not playlist, because that might take time. So you just give a search for songs option. You don't give a channels option right now, because you have to work on that to create channels. You give option of play podcast, last 50 played song. right? And you don't give up share option in the first version. So you have to identify what will the version 1 look like, and what will be the additions, what version 2 look like, and 3 and 4 and so on. So you have to ideate this first. Then when you have mapped out this flow, second thing would be you come back to the drawing board and start drawing how the user will interact with your application, right? With the version 1, with the version 2, with the version 3. So for this thing, let's look at only version 1 first. If you can do for all the versions, that'll be great. Or let's do it version 1. You should be busy. You guys should do problem statements a lot. You should start thinking like as a product manager first, and you have to do everything. So don't take it as it is a lot of work, but if you start doing it and you start enjoying it, you'll love this process. So map out the user flow, how it will look like with the first version, second version, and all the versions you're deciding. Then when you have identified the releases, you have to identify releases for each version, right? So once you have identified the user flow, you'll have to identify which release is necessary for which version. Then this is very important thing, right? Breaking down releases into features. So how a feature looks like is, once you have this dashboard release, that is, you're giving option for users to log in, and he lands to dashboard, he is able to go and check out podcast, check out last 50 played songs, check out share option settings, anything else. You'll have to define each feature. So if you say that he'll be able to do search, then you'll have to make search as a feature, and you have to define what search is for a user. So you'll say as a user, once he goes to search, he's able to, and he enters something, we search songs for him and we display the top 50 songs for him, and once he scrolls to all top 50, he can do a show more kind of thing. So that's how you define features, right? So you'll have to break down everything in releases and then into features. Now once you have all the features, you want to go to a review for designers. You go give these stories. So stories are basically features. So you have these stories ready, you go to the designer and say, these are the features you need to work on. Go and make designs for it, right? Go to the developers and QA and work on the features. So these stories are very important for these. This is why I'm so adamant for you guys to start documenting everything, because product managers 50% of time goes into documenting, and you'll have to document every feature. So let's say if it's a search and you have explained what a search would look like for a user, then you can go to the designer and say, this is how the search will look like, and you have to start designing on it. Go back, once you have the designer's design, you go to developers and say, this is how design search will look like. This is how it will work. Go and develop this. And then you go back to QAs and say that this is how it will work. Start testing it, and if it doesn't work, reject it. If it works, accept it. Right? So these story writing is very important. I'll share a link with you so that you guys know how to write stories. Then prioritizing. So once you have that, you'll work on developers and designer will give you estimate. You'll prioritize which feature goes on what. And so yeah, this is what I want you guys to work on from today to tomorrow when we meet next. Does it look a lot, everyone?
Yes, we can.
So, can we do it in Word or?
Do it on Notion.
Okay.
Let me explain you how can you can do it. Just type a backslash. You'll get an option of Have you guys heard of Jira in something?
I use Jira.
Yes.
Just do a so how you do this is go to Notion, just backslash and type board. You'll just go to card one. Once you have card one, define it as dashboard or search feature. Right now, so status and everything will come to that. Here is so how your story will look like is as a user when he is logged in and goes to search what so as a user what he can do, he can search for songs. So you need to just get what first. So what is this feature? This is a what. So what will happen after this? What will happen after he search for a song? He will be able to get results for the songs he searched, top 50 maybe, right? So this is what this is what will happen. And what else he'll get? He gets an option to explore more by clicking show more, and when he clicks on the song, right? So this is how you write a story. So this is how you write a feature. Once you have this feature, so search feature, let's say search feature is a part of what do you say, which release. Let's say this is a dashboard release, right? Once you have the dashboard release will have search feature. Then you can have a top 50 feature release, or you can have a podcast release. Like that, will make a story. Do you understand this?
Yes.
Deepak?
Yeah, got it now.
Just start exploring this, because this is the tools product managers use, right, for stories as well. So this is very important. Jira, Trello, these are the things, Clubhouse as well. So if you start using Notion, that is efficient enough. Do one thing, just map down all your releases here. What will the release will look like, right? Do it for version 1. Just do it for version 1. Let's say version 1. You define the objective of each releases. Let's say so first release would be a login release. What the user will accomplish after you release this, you will have to write what is the objective of this release. Once you have all the objectives, then you go to what do you say, mapping down the features and start defining each feature. Do you guys understand this? This might look a lot tedious, but once you start having this process, right? Once you start mapping down the user stories or user journey, it becomes very easy. I will tell you how. So once you know how the start and end will look like, it will be very easy to understand what is the release actually, what will the user accomplish after that, and then you will be able to identify, okay, this is very needed in this release, and that's how we do it. Any questions?
again, the timeline for the first release should be 2 months. So multiple, I mean, for the complete version is 2 months, so multiple releases has to
So this is
go
for
in
the
line with that.
complete product.
So by version 1, do we mean a complete product, right? I mean, the first version
So
of a product is
version one is defined as what is so necessary that you need that to make the product work.
okay.
So in Spotify, that will mean playing and pausing
First
songs. Yeah. So that's how you define minimum viable product. So the minimum thing you need to do for a product to work,
Okay.
right?
So we do this for the UPI application, right?
Yeah, for the UPI application. This problem statement is very similar, or you know how end product will look like, but eventually I need you to understand, right? I need you guys to understand what is the actual, what do you say, what is the actual work behind the scene that looks like for building a product from A to B, A to Z. Go on and just start working on this. Any questions for this? Let's have it now, because I know will have so many questions after this, but everyone wants to discuss anything.
Can you scroll down? Okay, so here the version, excuse me, the version is the one that is a feature, right? The feature that we are going to import.
So let's say this is a board. I'm not sure that if I can do this. Let's hide this. So you guys can also hide it. Just make sure this is the version 1. Let's suppose this is your version 1. How this version 1 board. How you'll do it is just backslash, right? Search for a board. Once you click a board, you'll get this board, right? Create your own Notion document. First thing is hide this bar. You'll have something like this, right? Go on this. Name all this as releases. So release 1. Go on this. Release 2.
Okay.
Release 3. So this is how your version. So this becomes your version 1. V1. So what is, once you have the version 1, you need to identify what are the releases that's necessary for version 1. Same for version 2.
Okay, one version can have 2-3 features, right?
One version, any version can have any number of releases.
Okay.
So how this works is, first thing is you have a version, you have a product, you have multiple versions, right? Every version will have multiple releases. So like here, version 1 has multiple releases, right? And one release will have multiple features. So feature 1. Feature 2. Right? So once you have these features ready, go on each feature and start describing each feature so that developers and designers understand. So you'll have to start with, as a user, what will the user do to reach to the feature 1? What is feature 1? So how user will interact with feature 1, and what will happen after he interacts with feature 1. So that one. As a user, he clicks on search, he is able to list all the search, and once he clicks on any search result, song is played, like that. Rahul?
Just one more thing, hope this story or the feature request, the writing in a similar way would it work for both developer, designer, QA, or you need to define that also separately?
So just write one version that is understand. So you'll have to write it so simply that even designers, developers, and QA, everyone can understand. Just write it in a way that any person reading it can understand.
Yeah, got it.
So yeah, that is how you do it. So this is how you really you are going to map out every features. Then you just write the objective of each release and what goes in which release. Yeah, that's not complicated now. It might overwhelm you right now, but start by the order that I have given you here, right? Don't jump into 3, 4 without doing the first. Start first, second. Once it's done, then only you can jump to the third or fourth. So
Got it.
don't jump into anything. Okay. Rahul,
Yeah, Rohan.
do you have any questions?
So I had that similar with Sriram asked. So it's not necessary to make different stories for designers and for QAs, right?
Yeah,
It should be a
no.
simple one statement which anyone can
Absolutely.
understand. Yeah.
I'll share you how we write design, how we write stories, right? I'll just give you some examples I have, I guess. So it becomes very easy for you to understand how you write stories. Let me see if we have that complete stories. Example. You can just search it anywhere, you'll get it how it looks like. But I'll just tell you one thing: don't jump to anything right straightforward without doing the previous step, because the flow is so important that if you don't do one step, it will break down everything. So just make sure that.
Okay.
Until so I'll just ask one question from everyone. Are you guys comfortable enough that we'll be able to complete this by tomorrow, the user stories? Because I wanted to have one designer who can look at the stories and comment out what is that is lacking or what is not there, or how you can improve. Do you think you will be able to complete everything tomorrow, the user stories? It should be.
Yeah.
I guess it should be. Start doing it maybe step by step. Let's do it. I'll call a designer. So he's a designer in Modi. He's a fantastic person. Let's talk to him and let's see what he has to offer to us, right? Tomorrow. Deepak, what time works for you tomorrow?
My work starts at 10 o'clock to 9:30.
So okay, we'll meet at 10 maybe tomorrow again. And let me know beforehand that if you have completed everything or else or not, because I don't want to have incomplete work and call out a guest, right? So just make sure that.
Okay. Yeah.
Awesome. Any questions for this session? This ran for a bit, right? And one more thing I was thinking, do you think we should start broadcasting it to YouTube and stuff, other stuff, that people can also comment on this and see others' perspective as well?
I think it will help us only.
Okay. Let's see tomorrow. Any questions related to this or whatever we discussed from Zomato or anything else as well? Even NEFT, because we went stories after stories, right? You guys look overwhelmed right now.
No.
What happened? What happened? Tell me.
I think problems will come maybe when we start working on it. I think that then we'll find exactly where we are facing difficulties. Right now it seems we'll do it. But when we start doing it, we'll face problems. Then
Yeah.
So for that, I'll tell you one thing you can do. Start using the channels pretty frequently and start communicating in between. And second thing is, there's no answers. Google cannot answer. So start using it also. And ask me if you think that's a lot of big problem you are facing right now. Because as a product manager, that's open book. You can refer to anyone. That's not a school test you are having. So yeah, be open to questions.
Sure.
Great. Sri, just give me the recording back if you would after that, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. We ran a marathon today.
It's 1 hour 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Right now,
Yeah.
recording.
I didn't know the time passed so fast.
Well, it was good to see a lot of stories from Zomato.
Yeah. Zomato was before coming to this session, I thought we'll just run for 30 minutes. We'll have this document. We'll go to Spotify, and that's it. But once we start telling stories, it's all stories.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, let's see you tomorrow. Start working on it from today because you want to get into that mindset, and once you have that, you'll be able to solve it.
Sure.
Great. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
thank you.
Bye.